Before we get started, just a bit of a recap on what perfect square trinomials are. Essentially, it means that the first and the last number or term are perfect squares. So they include the numbers, remember perfect squares include the numbers 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, etc. So they include these numbers in the first and the last term. The catch is that the base of the first and last term are in the middle, doubled. And in order to factor it, if it's positive here, then that means that in my bracket it's going to be positive. If the middle term is negative, then when I factor it, it's going to be negative. And I'm going to have a repeating binomial, so it's going to be, the whole thing is going to be squared because it's going to be the same thing twice. And all it is taking the root or of that first term or the base of the power, and then taking the base of the third term, excuse me, and that's how we factor it. So we always need to double check that that middle term is in fact these bases doubled, multiplied and then doubled, because if this isn't, then it's not a perfect square trinomial. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at the first example. I have y equals 9x squared minus 30x plus 25. So in this case, my a is equal to 9. Oh, sorry, my a, so I'm going to write this as a power. So 9x squared, I can write that as 3x in brackets squared, because I know that 3 squared is 9 and x squared is x squared. Minus 30x plus, and then 25 I'm going to write as a power, which makes it 5 squared. So that means my a is 3x. So notice how this looks the same as here. My a is 3x. My 2ab, actually it might be easier if I first list my b. My b is 5, which means my 2ab is 2 times 3x times 5, which gives me 30x, which is my middle term, so I'm good. So that's a perfect square trinomial. And then in order to factor it, I'm just going to take brackets squared. This is a minus sign, so it's going to be negative in between. I'm going to take my a and put it first, and then I'm going to take my b and put it second. Next example. Whenever you have a trinomial that you're factoring, the first step is always to see if there's a common factor. We always common factor first. So common factor first. CFF, common factor first. So I'm first going to notice that all of these are even numbers, which means I can actually simplify and divide them all by 2. So I'm going to factor out the 2 to the front, and I'm left with x squared plus 8x plus 16. Now when I see this trinomial, I notice, all right, I have a perfect square here, and I have a perfect square here. So that means I'm going to write it as power. So I have 2, and then x squared is already written like that, plus 8x, and then 16 written as a power is 4 squared. So that means my a is x, my b is 4, and my 2ab is 2 times x times 4, which gives me 8x, which is my middle term, so I'm good. So I can factor it This is going to be plus, and I'm going to fill in x and 4. Okay, so the reason that I wanted to review this is because understanding how I go from here to here is going to help us in order to do what we're going to do in a couple videos. So make sure, now that you've seen this, try these on your own, and let me know if you have any questions before you move on. It's good to have a firm grasp on this before you move on.